Welcome to Coffee and a Weather Map with Jeff, and it is Monday, July 14th, 2025. It's been kind of an active weekend. I tried to do some posting over the weekend. I really couldn't get the time in to put together a full vlog, I should say. And I thought about doing a quick update, but just didn't give it a chance. We have moved our RV down to a nice little campground. Anyway, to get in with what we got, we'll just jump right into everything. Before we get into the radar, which I would like to do here, I'm going to show you the surface map, which I typically do. You can see that cold front / stationary front with several waves of low pressure along it that stretches down from central Quebec through the lower Great Lakes, specifically right through Ontario, and then about halfway through Erie before it starts to go down into Ohio, with a low down by the Cincinnati area. Another low stretched along that front that's back into Missouri, where the low is around the St. Louis area, and then that goes back into through Oklahoma into part of the Red River Valley. As we look at that, and then we take a look at the upper air, if you kind of notice, the fronts have not moved a whole lot, and that's due to the fact that this whole southern tier of the United States has been pretty much under a ridge of high pressure of some sort. And so when you've got that, you don't have a whole lot of movement in the cold front or the lows across the area. You get little things that spin up along the front, and there is a temperature boundary there, but it's not a very strong one, and that's partially because the sun just keeps beating it over the head and kind of tamping it down, but enough that there is some uplift along the boundary. Otherwise, the main part of the jet streak or jet stream is up there along the Canadian border into the upper Great Lakes before it turns northeast into Quebec. If you kind of notice, though, there is a trough of low pressure that kind of stretches all the way down into Texas. You can kind of see this by looking at the wind flow. You've got that southwest wind flow there in East Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, but then just off to the right of that, you've got that northeast wind flow that's coming down through Oklahoma, Missouri, Oklahoma, and into North Texas, and then out into West Texas. So that's a trough of low pressure, and you can kind of, by looking at the wind barbs, you can see that it goes all the way up into that short wave that's getting into the jet stream that's at 500 millibars. So to kind of put some of this all together, we're going to take a look at the radar, and this is off of MRMS. There are some showers and thunderstorms off to the north and getting up into Canada, and we'll discuss those a little bit later. But the main thing is you just see this long trail of showers and thunderstorms that go all the way up into New England and at least into southern Canada and into the maritime provinces. Since you would expect most of the showers and thunderstorms to be breaking out on the warm side of those cold fronts. The big thing, though, too, to remember is that there's been this constant south to southeast flow that's just kind of with that disturbance of upper air, and I can draw on this map with this app with radar scope. You can kind of see where some of those fronts are, and then you could even say that the 500 millibar trough is running right about in this general area, because it's kind of got a reflection all the way down to the surface. I mean, part of this is also the thunderstorms showing that environment, but you've got all these little systems around here that are able to give uplift in the atmosphere and to get things kicked off. The current area in Texas that people are most concerned about now, where these MPDs are, or mesoscale precipitation discussions. One here is in, turn off my drawings, but one here in the hill country, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second again. And the other one's up here in Texas, up near Dallas. It's only good for another hour. There have been swiftwater rescues and such going on. There are warnings. Let's see what kind these are. Yeah, they're flash flood warnings in that area, and they have a considerable tag on them. So there is some major issues going on. They had flash flood warning up there to south of the Metroplex as well. But this area in here has just been, actually, you even argue all the way up here. Here's San Angelo office, and then EWX is, so here's San Antonio. Okay, so the EWX office is here. So they're in charge of basically this is their border-ish in the general area. So this is all part of the hill country. As you transition further north, you start running into hills, and there's an escarpment, the Balcones Escarpment, and I did not draw in where it should be. I'll take a look at that here in another second on a different map. But with all that moisture moving up there and the trough of low pressure in the upper atmosphere kind of hanging out there because there's nothing really to push it along, this is just, it's part of the ingredients that's really helped to get these things moving, or not moving, but to see where these triggers have been going, and that's why these areas have been favored. You know, as you start to push moisture up, whether it's through a mechanical process like a block, like a mountain or hills, you know, that does a lot. And you see that this flow has been pretty consistent. I talked about this a few weeks back. This is a pretty typical pattern for South Texas, although you don't always see the moisture getting this far inland. We're seeing dew points in the 70s, or right around 70, into the lower 70s, all the way up into here. That does happen. It's just that it's been so consistent that I think that the moisture is just starting to trying to wring out of the area. And to kind of give an illustration, I'm going to crank up the high-res topography here on WPC's map, and you can kind of see that here's, as you go from the light green to the slightly lime green to a little bit darker, and then it gets into the yellows. This is the hill country in this general area, and that's where all this has been taking place. So those are things that those two offices, San Angelo and New Braunfels, the San Antonio Austin office, they have been dealing with over these last now over a week, since this all started around July 3rd. Things looked pretty sure that it was going to happen back then, and then it's continued that way as we get through it. And to kind of show you that these X's are areas of vorticity, or areas of spin in the atmosphere. On a larger scale, you can see that they kind of stretch down there into Texas, along where that shortwave trough is moving through. Okay, so kind of update the map here. It's been about a half an hour since I last looked at it. Not a whole lot of things have changed a lot, and we will get into the outlooks, but which you can kind of see where the outlooks are, at least for precipitation for today. There are some SPC things that we have to take a look at as well. So in the east, we do have a flood watch, which stretches from the Berkshires in Massachusetts down through the Catskills into the Poconos in Pennsylvania, and then all the way down into central Virginia, all the way down to the southern part of Virginia. This area has also been hit with quite a lot with a stalled out cold front that's been just kind of sitting there causing precipitation. Of course, south of the cold front, it's pretty warm, so you've got several heat advisories there in Georgia, Florida, and in Louisiana. There is some river flooding going on in Ohio. Let's see which one that is. It's a flood advisory. And in this case, they have low-lying and poor drainage areas. So some minor, very minor flooding, nothing that's necessarily life-threatening unless it's undermining roadways, culverts, things like that. So remember, if you see water across the road, just turn around. It's not worth trying to go through it as much as people think. The big area of fog advisory and probably an SPS for that same fog as it gets a little bit patchier there in Indiana, across central Illinois, and into Iowa and northern Missouri. The upper Great Lakes around Michigan, Wisconsin, and in Minnesota, we're still showing smoke causing air quality issues across those states. And I can say for a fact this morning that it is a very hazy, kind of orangish morning sunrise around here in West Michigan. Get a little bit of coffee there. And of course, the area that we've been seeing in the news since July 4th, same area, we still have flood watches going on. There's still flood advisories, river flood warnings, and flash flood warnings this morning, as we saw earlier on the radar. Those areas are going to continue to be a problem here as long as we don't get any movement in the upper atmosphere here. So we may be seeing this for a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the outlooks. More regional smoke from wildfires in Colorado. That's what those darker gray spots are. Oh, we have one flood watch, it looks like, in the Albuquerque forecast area. Yep, it's probably for a burn scar. That would be my guess. We can just kind of quickly flood watch. There will expire 9 a.m. this evening. Flash flood watch for a portion of New Mexico for the Ruidoso area, burn scars. So that is an issue. That's always an issue with flash flooding, is after fires, you'll get burn scars there where the ground has been heated up so much that it gets kind of solid and the water just runs right off pretty quickly in those areas. As we get further out to the west, we do have wind issues in the north, in the Pacific Northwest and into the Rocky Mountains, and even out in the eastern plains. As we discussed before, that area in eastern Montana, it has a lake wind advisory. As you go a little bit further to the west into the mountains, they've got a high wind watch as well as a wind advisory going on. There's also a wind advisory there in northeastern Washington. All that pink there is a red flag warning, so they have low humidities and high winds going in with all that. As you go further south, however, that is all heat advisories, as well as, and you can see that around the Seattle area, all the way down through Portland into Salem, and then down into the I forget what the mountain range there is in that particular spot, but I think that's maybe the Cascades. Anyways, heat advisories until you get into the Medford area, and then it's a heat warning, and then heat advisories across Northern California into Nevada. There's one in the southern San Joaquin or the Sacramento Valley. I can't remember which one of those it is, as well as in heat warnings there in southern Nevada into the deserts and northern Arizona. Okay, that's kind of a summary of what's been going on so far here this morning with watches and warnings that we've got across the area. This morning, we are expecting for the day out across here a few marginals. I wouldn't be surprised if some of this I wouldn't be surprised if some of this gets a little bit more organized and we get an upgrade. And that could be anywhere along that area here in the east, or it's marginal. Would not be surprised. I think the rest of them are going to probably stay, although up there in the north, there is another wave trying to come through, so that's also a possibility that there could be a little bit more of an upgrade there, but we'll see how that goes. Most of this is going to probably center right along the fronts, which kind of stretches all the way down here where all the general thunder is, and that's one of the things that we'll take a look at here when we get to the excessive rain outlooks. Day 2, so on Tuesday, we're expecting everything to start to move offshore, or at least lessen in the severity. It doesn't mean that we won't have issues heavy rain wise, but we'll see what goes on. Except for there is a potential for a slight risk to get into the South Dakota and Nebraska as that next little wave comes pushing through. Then it looks like things, at least at this time, want to wash out a bit, and maybe we get a stoppage in the rain around Texas. Okay, so on the I switched a little bit over here to the a new map I went looking for. I knew the Weather Service had sort of those nicer maps like I just showed you with SPC. They had ones for WPC as well. This is for day 1. And I may have to retap it here. Okay, there we go. That's where one of the moderates are. You can see it basically is the hill country, all the way over to the Rio Grande Plains. One of the things that I've noted is that one of the river systems, the Nueces, has its headwaters up there by Uvalde, and then runs down into the Corpus Christi area. And the Corpus Christi area has been very short of water. So anything that helps to get into there is good. However, whenever you get drought and then you start forcing this much water into it, there are issues that can turn into pretty nasty issues around here. All right, the moderate for some of this rain now, as we saw, there was a flash or a flooded watch there in the north, in the northeast, in the mid-Atlantic states. So the area where that watch actually is right over the moderate area, where there's at least a 40% chance of having excessive rainfall leading to flash flooding. This is focused mainly in on the Mount Holly office, but you can see it stretches down into the Washington, D.C. area as well, and almost up into the New York City forecast area. All right. And then last but not least, this is the Melbourne office's forecast map of this, but at least for their area, but it also includes the Tampa Bay office as well as the northern part of the Miami office. But there's that slight risk as we get into the disturbance that is going to cross the Florida Peninsula here today and tomorrow. That could cause some issues that we'll talk about for the Hurricane Center. And then we've got a marginal up there where we're expecting that next shortwave to come through, where we have the marginal severe thunderstorm threat. All right, let's see if we can get this to work correctly. For tomorrow, the slight risk for heavy rain moves a little bit more west there along the Canadian border into and south, so that it gets down into the northern plains and the upper Great Lakes. We have continuing along that front in the east, we still have slight risks that stretch pretty much where the moderate risk is today. The marginals kind of join up down further south into with Florida as that disturbance crosses the area. And it looks like we have some monsoonal moisture that's trying to work its way up from Baja California into Arizona. And so there's another risk of flash flooding down in southern Arizona for tomorrow. Yep, this is one of the problems with this page, though. It is experimental, but it is nice. For day 3, we're just looking at marginals across most of the area. It looks like the front's trying to push through, so we'll see how that works. By the time it gets done here, we'll see if we can get enough of it. That secondary wave comes through so that it's in mainly the upper Great Lakes with a front that stretches all the way back into Arizona. We'll see how that goes, as well as another feature that's trying to push down through out of Montana and into the foothills, the front range of the Rocky Mountains into Wyoming. Okay, I alluded to this, and this is something that everyone's been talking about. We'll see how this goes. There is a disturbance coming through, and right now, the Hurricane Center has it listed as a 30% chance of development within the next 7 days. Just to take a look, and it's a 10% chance in the next 48 hours. The problem that I have been seeing is that the global models, the European and the GFS, have gone back and forth on this, and there isn't a whole lot of support in the ensembles for it, with either ensemble section. In fact, if you look at the lab cyclone, this is for, I'm trying to remember, oh yeah, 18Z, so 2 p.m. on Thursday, July 17th. The European has some low centers in there, but they're not necessarily actual major lows coming out of it. This is just one of it. And then the experimental model that Google's has with their weather lab on this DeepMind project of theirs is showing it somewhere in the same general area. However, as I've looked, only one model really takes this and goes and runs with it and then puts it today into New Orleans, and that's the Icon model. I don't know how much to trust that. It has been right at times, but as a friend of mine would say, you know, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. So it has not always produced. Sometimes it is way overproduced with things that have happened across most of the area, especially in the Gulf. Well, I would say is the NAM yesterday was showing something coming off the Florida coast and beginning to spin up. And then I saw later on someone had shown that it actually was trying to bring something that was probably at least a tropical storm in just south of Mississippi and Alabama. However, that's gone again today. So at least overnight. The 0Z and the 6Z runs are not showing that at all. The Icon still is showing something. Instead of going into Texas, though, it's got it going into Louisiana. So it's just all over the place. At this point, I would prefer to keep in mind that the European and the GFS, both on the deterministics and a very low-level version of any of the stuff on their ensemble models, so I don't give a whole lot of, I just leave this as a wait and see sort of thing. So don't be too carried away with some of the things that you see out there on the internet. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be prepared, and you need to keep an eye on this. I mean, the Hurricane Center does know what it's talking about, so it's, you know, got a 30% chance that something happens. It means there's a 70% chance that nothing happens. So just remember that there is the possibility of formation. Nevertheless, as we saw back here, let me clear this back out again and put the EROs down. Here we'll do the state one. We'll move it here. There we go. Florida is going to have at least a slight risk for, which is a greater than 15% chance of flash flooding across most of the peninsula today. And that goes into tomorrow as well. So just keep that in mind, that as things go, we'll see where everything kind of lands over the next 7 days. All right, so local forecasts. Well, we got more smoke today, as the Northern Michigan forecast out of the Gaylord office has. Temperatures basically in the 80s, smoky and hazy. Kind of that same way with Tuesday, although I think that the smoke is supposed to start breaking out or getting pushed out of the area. We're getting a little bit more into the 80s, so that there'll be some 90s, and those usually occur somewhere along M55, from about somewhere either around Cadillac all the way over to, say, Gladwin. Those are usually some of the warmer spots. Sometimes we get them a little bit further north in that dry sandy area there, up by Grayling and places west or east into Mayo. Once you get up on the plateau there in northern Michigan, it starts to get a little cooler, so it wouldn't be probably not maybe 90 or in the upper 80s. We'll see. The 82 is probably up there by Sault Ste. Marie, or even a little bit along the coastal areas, so just beware. And then after that front comes through, on Wednesday we start getting scattered showers and thunderstorms. Temperatures mainly in the mid 70s to through the 80s during that day as well. Of course, there is the air quality alert today. Grand Rapids has one as well, as we saw on the map. For South Texas, we continue to watch the tropical weather outlook with that 30% chance for development there in the eastern Gulf. It is supposed to, if it does form anything, kind of move across over into the northern part of the Gulf. Doesn't look like it would affect the Corpus Christi area or anybody else from South Texas there, whether it's in the Victoria Crossroads or down the rest of the coastal plains. Highs today are pretty typical for summertime, right around 90 in a lot of the coastal areas. Right along the coast is probably 88. You can see Port Lavaca is at 80, going to expect it to get to high of 88 today. But 90s across the area, getting close to 100 there as you get into the brush country with Tilden and Freer and places to the west to Laredo, where we actually have a high temperature forecast of 100. Partly sunny, and there'll be isolated showers and thunderstorms. So anything that can survive coming further south into, I wouldn't say drier air, just it's not as favorable for uplift down into the brush country or into the coastal plains of anything that's coming out of the hill country. So that's just what they're watching for right now. All right, beach cast, as I said, upper 80s. Southeast winds, waves heights 2 to 3 feet, and the rip current risk is low. Tonight, pretty typical, mid 70s inland, all the way out to the lower 80s out along the coastal plains and into the barrier islands. And looks like Laredo should be a little bit warmer than mid, probably in the upper 70s. 5-day outlook looks like summer in South Texas. Temperatures in the 90s to right around 100 as you go. Of course, it's that east has the lower temperatures closer to the Gulf, and the west has the higher temperatures out there in the desert regions. And temperatures at night pretty much in the 70s most of the time as well. So with that, I'll say have a good afternoon, stay safe, and keep your eye out on the weather.